Is in light of this one-year anniversary since January 6th. The polls are very troubling in the United States. More than 71% of American Republicans continue to believe that Biden's victory was so-called illegitimate, and 81% of Americans believe there is a serious threat to our democracy. Doris, from the historical point of view all the way back to the Civil War, which you have written so much about, are you surprised that 1 year later we do not seem to be out of the woods?
I am surprised. You know, I thought a line had been drawn after January 6th, that finally there had been an understanding of the need for a change in the country and to get back to our democratic ideals. It seemed hopeful when Senator McConnell talked about the fact that President Trump was responsible morally and practically for the attack that had happened, and that it was an undemocratic attack, and that he hadn't done what he needed to do once he knew what was happening to stop it. And when Kevin McCarthy said it was an undemocratic attempt and some sort of responsibility had to be accrued, it seemed to me that the Republican Party was accepting some sort of separation from President Trump, much as after the attack on Charles Sumner. I had seen it as an analogy to what happened in the 1850s when Charles Sumner was attacked by a pro-slavery congressman, Charles Sumner being an anti-slavery senator, in the Senate itself, bludgeoned with a cane into unconsciousness, his spine and brain injuries so great that he couldn't even come back for 3 years. And it changed the whole party structure. The Whig Party collapsed. The new Republican Party was formed. Anti-slavery got a great strength as a result of it. And I thought that's what was happening after January 6th. But now to see a year later, you know, that the idea that the election was stolen is still agreed upon by 81% of the Republican Party, that the people who said that this was an undemocratic thing have changed their mind and gone down to see President Trump. It really worries me, as nothing has done in my lifetime, about whether we can have a peaceful transition of power. It's the most important thing in a democratic country. You accept a loss. Every other president accepted a loss, and you move on. If we don't accept this kind of election in January 6th of 2021, will we not accept it in 2024, 2028? I mean, there's a real scare, I think, that's in our system right now. This has to be fought.
So let me ask you, Timothy Snyder, you know, what Doris just said and what observers are saying, that this January 6th event may have just been a dress rehearsal, may have been the indicator of things to come.
I think at the moment, unfortunately, that is the default. I think that is now the most likely thing to happen. I think if we're going to address the future as a democratic country, what we have to realize is that that's not some extreme or dystopian scenario which is being thought up by somebody in some back room. That is what is actually unfolding in front of us. And I think if we have a problem in this country, it's that we have a very hard time remembering the recent past. So we have a hard time remembering that this almost happened a year ago. There was, in fact, a plot to overturn a democratic election for president in the United States. It just happened. And if we have another problem in this country, it's that we believe that we're exceptional, we're a city on a hill, these things might happen elsewhere, but they can't happen here. And it's that very faith in our own exceptionality which prevents us from preparing for what is, frankly, quite obvious. I mean, the things which make this very likely, some of them have already been suggested by Doris. Number one, all of this is ensconced in a big lie. As early as the summer of 2020, Mr. Trump was already saying that he wouldn't concede office if he lost, that if he lost, it could only be fraudulent. So this big lie that if Republicans lose or if Trump personally loses, there must be fraud, that surrounds everything. There's a penumbra of that around everything. That's the justification for the new state laws. That's a filter for who can be who in the Republican Party. That creates a huge media safe space on the right side of American media. And then the other thing which is strange about our system is that we don't have a national electoral authority, like, say, Canada. We have the states, and the states are basically able to compete or race to the bottom to find ways to subvert the election the next time around. So honestly, it's not a question of whether it can happen. It is happening. The question is, What do we do about it in the meantime?
Okay, so that's what I want to ask you both. Let me just turn to Doris from the perspective of history and what you are seeing now as you witness this happening in your lifetime. I want to ask you both, Doris first, how does one roll back this threat?
You know, I think we have to go back to history just for another moment to be able to see what we need to do today. Because one of the things that Abraham Lincoln warned about when the Civil War was just beginning was that the central idea of democracy was the idea that you could have regular people choosing their electors and choosing their government. And that what the South had done by not accepting the fact that the Republicans had won the election in the North and broken away from the Union and secession as a result showed that democracy can't work. And I think what we have to do, it's the most important legislation that has to be passed right now. Voting rights is absolutely essential to this right now. The bills that are there to be done, and the filibuster will have to be changed to make them come to the floor. They're going to protect the right to vote that's being undone right now. It's time for a political revolution at the top of our country, and those bills are addressing that. And it seems to me that that's the most important issue that should be on our minds right now. Democracy is at peril. It's been at peril at other times in our place, but we were able to do something about it. You know, when Franklin Roosevelt was taking office, somebody said to him, you know, if your program works, you will be the greatest president in the country. If it fails, you will be the worst president in the country. He said, no, if it fails, I will be the last president in the country. So there's a real sense that when we've had crises in our countries before, it was an economic crisis in 1933, that it looked like democracy could not prevail. But Franklin Roosevelt came in. He was able to establish faith in the government. People were saying we've got a leader again, and that fear that some sort of coup might take place was undone. We are now in a similar situation, and actions, the most important thing we have to do is to get voting rights. The most important fight in my lifetime that I've seen in a long lifetime now.
And as you say,